I used to believe that justice was blind, until I discovered it had a price tag. 3 years ago I walked into that courthouse believing the legal system would protect me. I was Kevin Torres, a 38-year-old electrician from Phoenix, and I thought that having truth on my side meant something. I was wrong about a lot of things back then, but mostly about how deep corruption could run in places where it should never exist. My marriage to Alina had been crumbling for 2 years before we finally called it quits. She'd been having an affair with her personal trainer, and when I confronted her with bank statements showing she'd been financing his business with our joint accounts, she didn't even deny it. Instead, she filed for divorce and demanded half of everything, including the electrical contracting business I'd built from nothing over 15 years. First red flag should have been when Alina hired Vincent Morrison, the most expensive divorce attorney in the city. Morrison had a reputation for getting impossible wins for his clients, and his fees were astronomical. Alina worked part-time at a yoga studio. There was no way she could afford him, but somehow she'd retained his services with a substantial retainer. Our case was assigned to Judge Harrison Webb, a man with 23 years on the bench and what appeared to be an impeccable reputation. He was known for being thorough, fair, and tough on anyone who tried to game the system. I actually felt relieved when I heard his name. The first hearing went exactly as I'd expected it wouldn't go. Despite presenting clear evidence of Alina's affair and financial misconduct, Judge Webb seemed dismissive of our documentation. When my attorney tried to enter bank records showing Alina's unauthorized withdrawals, Webb sustained every objection from Morrison's team. It was like watching a choreographed performance where I wasn't given the script. Alina was awarded temporary spousal support of $4,200 a month, which was more than I netted most months after business expenses. When I tried to explain that this amount would bankrupt my company, Judge Webb cut me off and said I should have thought about financial planning before ending my marriage. The second hearing was worse. Webb granted Alina temporary residence in our house and awarded her use of my business truck, claiming she needed reliable transportation. My attorney filed motion after motion, all denied. Alina's requests, no matter how unreasonable, were approved almost before Morrison finished speaking. I started documenting everything. Something was fundamentally wrong with these proceedings, but I couldn't prove it. My business was hemorrhaging money. I was living in a studio apartment above my brother's garage, and Alina was posting Instagram photos of spa weekends and expensive dinners. The breakthrough came by accident. I'd been working a job at the Hilton downtown, installing new electrical systems in their conference center. The job required me to run cables through the ceiling space above what I later learned was the hotel bar. I was up there for 3 days, and on the second day I heard voices coming from the private dining area below. I recognized Judge Webb's voice immediately. He had a distinctive gravelly tone that I'd become unfortunately familiar with. But hearing Alina's laugh echo from the same room made my blood run cold. I knew I should have climbed down and left, but something made me stay and listen. The next hearing is Thursday, Webb was saying. I'll rule on the business valuation then. Morrison's expert put it at $340,000, which seems reasonable. That's perfect, Alina replied. Kevin has no idea how much the contracts are really worth. He keeps terrible records. What about the offshore account? Webb asked. Morrison mentioned you'd moved some assets. All handled, Alina said. Kevin's too stupid to find it. He barely knows how to use online banking. I was recording on my phone before I even realized what I was doing. For the next 20 minutes I documented a conversation that detailed exactly how they planned to destroy my case. Webb explained how he'd been ruling, why certain evidence was inadmissible, and how the final settlement would be structured. Alina provided information about assets she'd hidden and debts she'd fabricated. The most damaging part came when Webb mentioned his fee structure. Apparently Morrison had been funneling payments to Webb through a consulting company Webb's wife owned. For every dollar Alina was awarded beyond what I could actually pay, Webb received 10% through this arrangement. I had 37 minutes of audio that would end Webb's career and send Alina to prison for fraud, but I didn't use it right away. Something told me to wait, to let them dig their hole deeper. The final hearing was scheduled for the following month, and I wanted to see exactly how far they'd push their corruption. The final hearing was a masterclass in judicial misconduct. Webb awarded Alina 60% of my business, $180,000 in spousal support paid immediately, and exclusive ownership of our house. The ruling would have left me completely bankrupt, forced to sell my business to pay her, with no way to make the monthly support payments. When Webb asked if there were any final motions, my attorney looked defeated, but I stood up. Your Honor, I have new evidence that's relevant to this case. Morrison objected immediately, claiming discovery was closed. Webb was about to sustain when I said the words that changed everything. It's a recording of you and my wife discussing how to defraud me. The courtroom went completely silent. Alina's face went white and Morrison looked like he'd been punched. Webb tried to maintain his composure, but I could see panic in his eyes. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Torres, Webb said carefully. It's a serious crime, Your Honor, I replied, pulling out my phone. Would you like me to play the audio where you discuss your 10% consulting fee? What happened next was like watching dominoes fall. Morrison tried to argue that the recording was illegally obtained, but Webb couldn't rule on his own corruption case. Elena bolted from the courtroom, and within an hour FBI agents were interviewing everyone involved. The recording was crystal clear. Webb had been taking bribes through his wife's consulting company for 3 years, affecting dozens of cases. Elena had hidden $89,000 in offshore accounts and had forged documents claiming I owed debts that didn't exist. Webb resigned within a week and was indicted on federal corruption charges. He eventually pleaded guilty and received 4 years in prison. Elena was charged with fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. She received 2 years and had to pay full restitution plus penalties. Morrison lost his law license, and his firm collapsed when investigators found evidence of his involvement in other bribery schemes. Apparently, Webb and Morrison had been running this operation for years, targeting men in divorce cases who were unlikely to fight back effectively. My case was reheard by a new judge who reviewed all the evidence Webb had illegally excluded. Elena ended up with 15% of our assets, which was actually fair given her contributions to our marriage. I kept my business, my house, and most importantly, my faith that justice could still exist when people are willing to fight for it. The hardest part wasn't the legal battle or even the financial stress. It was realizing how close I'd come to losing everything to a system I'd trusted completely. If I hadn't been working in that hotel ceiling, if I hadn't heard that conversation, I would have been destroyed by people who were supposed to protect me. Elena tried to contact me after her release, claiming she'd been manipulated by Morrison and Webb. She wanted to reconcile, said she'd made terrible mistakes, and wanted to start over. I listened to her voicemail once and deleted it. Some betrayals are too deep for forgiveness, and some trust can never be rebuilt. I still work in electrical contracting, but now I also volunteer with men's rights organizations, helping other guys navigate divorce proceedings. I've learned to spot the warning signs of judicial corruption, and I've helped several men document suspicious behavior in their cases. The money Elena stole was eventually returned with interest, and the FBI's investigation led to reforms in our county court system. Webb's cases over the previous 3 years were all reviewed, and dozens of men received new hearings when evidence of bias was discovered. Sometimes people ask me if I'm angry about what happened, if I hate Elena for what she put me through. The truth is, I'm grateful. Not for the betrayal or the corruption, but for the lesson it taught me about standing up for myself when everyone else has given up. I used to believe that justice was blind. Now I know that sometimes you have to give it glasses, a hearing aid, and a recording device to make sure it sees and hears the truth. That courthouse taught me that the system only works when people are willing to fight to make it work. And sometimes, the most powerful weapon you can have is a smartphone with a good microphone and the courage to use it when it matters most. Justice isn't blind. It just needs people who refuse to look the other way when it's being bought and sold like a commodity. And sometimes, being in the right place at the wrong time is exactly what the world needs to set things right again.